Hi, my name is Jane Scarf, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And what I want to talk to you today about is mandate. What is it? And specifically, what is it in relation to the vax passport, whatever you want to call them, policies, regulations, and so on. So, first, we do have a regulation related to vax passports, and that is directed towards non-essential business owners, and it specifies that they're to ask for the vax passport in order to have entry into their establishments. So for restaurants and gyms and other so-called non-essential businesses. And that's found in Regulation 364 /20. And it also is found in Directive 6, which is under the Health Promotion and Protection Act. And it's for healthcare workers. And we've found that it actually has no force or effect. It's connected to ROA regulations requiring people to follow the public health directives with regard to COVID-19. However, in the Promotion and Protection Act, it says that if there's a conflict between that act and Occupational Health and Safety Standards Act, the OSHA prevails. And in OSHA, it says the employer cannot gather personal medical information from you unless there's a court order, a tribunal decision, or a statute, not bylaw. Big difference. We call them rinky-dinky bylaws, so they don't qualify or count. So that Directive 6 is basically null and void in my view. And then there's one other little slippery thing that I wanted to talk to you today, and it's a recommendation, a public health recommendation for basically all employers to require the vaccine passport for their workers. Now, the slippery part of this is that they appear to be following the format of establishing a mandate. Okay, now, in order to establish the mandate, there has to be a recommendation and an agreement to enact that recommendation. You can check this out in terms of definition, legal definition, in Black's Law Dictionary. Mine is 8th edition, but I think it's in all the editions. And you just look up the definition of mandate, and item number 4 will tell you that there's a process that they call mandate, where mandator, with OR at the end, which would be the government in this case, will put forward a recommendation to a mandatory, A-R-Y, which in this case would be the employers. And when there's an agreement, then there's a contract. And under that contract, the mandatory, A-R-Y, has to be careful how they execute the services, because they assume the liability once the contract has been reached. So the mandator is no longer liable. So I think that's what they're doing. And for whatever reason, many employers are jumping on that bandwagon and implementing that. And I believe that there's financial incentives, because since March 2020, there's been these sweet loans and grants that were given to organizations and businesses. And in there, they have a section that obligates the lender or the receiver of the grant to undertake to follow the directives, not just the directives, I think it says guidelines of public health with regard to COVID, and they have to agree to let the public health in to examine the property to make sure that the conditions are being met. So I think together this makes an official mandate. Once there's the recommendation and the agreement and then the enactment. So I'm recommending that if you're faced with this threat of leave without pay or termination if you don't produce your vax passport, that you bring the liability that's related to your employer. There's liability for breach of privacy, for breach of informed consent, and there's various criminal elements to this because it's using threats, so it's extorting people to try to make them do something they don't want to do, and it's inciting hate. So those are all criminal offenses, and there's liability for that. And then, of course, the damages, you can ask for monetary relief for the violations, but also there's loss of wages as well, which becomes a damage. So make sure that your employer knows this, and this may start to change the format, or not the format, but their intentions or their actions. And because they may not realize that. Many of them are probably thinking, oh, well, the government wants me to do this, and if I do it, well, what could happen? Well, they need to look in Black's Law Dictionary under mandate, and they'll see what happens. They become responsible. And that would be including vax injury, too, by the way, because the vax companies have been released from liability for damages. The government is by-stepping it by doing it this way. If they had straight up issued a regulation even that required employers to do this, then they would be responsible. But instead they're going, oh, do you want to do this? Oh, you do? Okay. And then that flips the responsibility over to the mandatory, ARY. So check it out and try and use that information going forward with the employer. We are adding that to the notices of liability that we're creating on the website standforthee.ca, and that's the digit 4. And so going forward, there'll be a notice to the employer that they're going to have to foot the bill for all the liability. Okay, that's it for the day. And remember, #we got this.